Thank you for inviting me today. I'm going to start right off by sharing a link in the chat box with everybody that you feel free to browse as I'm talking, because my goal today is to bring everybody's comfort level up another notch with the NUA 3.0 platform. Many, if not all of you, saw that we were in a transition last year from the old website to the new. A lot has been going on since then to make sure that we have a smooth rollout for the 2022 growing season. So we're going to talk a lot about pollen tube growth model, and I'm going to go over some of the nuts and bolts of that after I give you a higher level overview of what we can do to support you and maintain that comfort level going forward. And then other folks such as Dr. Robinson are going to talk about other aspects of the NUA 3.0 platform and how they combine with other approaches that we take for crop load management. So I'm an extension associate with New York State Integrated Pest Management. And I just want to say right off the bat that NUA, or the Network for Environment and Weather Applications, is made possible because it's part of this program. It's certainly not a standalone effort. A lot of different people from across the spectrum within the Cornell system make these things possible. And you're really going to see that today. We've got the researchers and the extension folks coming together on the technology side, New York State IPM, and then also I'll add that the Northeast Regional Climate Center is another key partner. So all the data we are actually using to inform these very useful models, it's all managed through a collaboration with that group. So with that, I'm going to get started. So right off the bat, if you haven't already been on NUA this year, nua.cornell.edu, I encourage you to visit it because it's a completely different experience than what we've had in place since 2006. My predecessor, Dr. Juliette Carroll, and myself worked very, very hard the past 4 years with the development team, again at NRCC, and as well as folks in computer science down in Ithaca, to really give a positive user experience, to add some new features that make it easier to navigate and remember information and things like that. So this first slide is really just pointing out the fact that NUA is a website, but it behaves like an app. So one of the first questions I always get is, oh, is there a NUA app that I can download? We made a strategic decision a couple years ago as we were developing this to go with a website format that is what we call responsive. So on your desktop, you're going to see something like is displayed on the left-hand side of your slide here. If you were to go onto your smart device or even a tablet, you're going to get a different experience. Everything is still available there. So when we're talking about the pollen tube growth model or carbohydrate thinning, on a phone, it's going to look a little bit different, and it's organized in such a way that all the features are still there. It just makes it easier to use on a smaller screen. So to that point, and you'll see that I'm really going to do this in the next 15 minutes or so, I'm really cutting to the chase. So if you're on a smartphone and you want to use a model to access those important elements or functions on any given part of our website, you're going to see what we call the little hamburger menu in the upper left-hand corner. It's really important to remember this because if you forget that's there, it's going to seem like the model is not working the way it should, and it could create some frustration. So just remember that. The other thing I want to point out is whether that is open or closed. On a smart device, it might be harder to see that there are actually scroll bars. So you can click and drag and move up and down through all the different parts of a given web page, however you normally would in a browser on your smartphone otherwise. So I just wanted to point those out very quickly as well. In terms of recommended browsers, if you worked with us last spring, we had what we were calling a beta or a test website going. And at that time, we said to only use Chrome because we were still in development. However, since October of last year, we have had the full site up and running, and we have gotten a lot of really good feedback. We actually have had some good stress tests on the website, and everything is working really well. So at this point, I'm comfortable saying that you can pretty much use any one of these 4 popular browsers moving forward. If you do run into some problems, and I'll get into this in the next couple of slides, we have communication channels back to myself and the NUA platform so that you're not hanging out there all alone. Before I get to that, though, I just want to cover some best practices that I've come up with for this online resource. So best practice number one is that NUA is intended to supplement knowledge and expertise that is shared by our extension professionals and researchers. I have Grapevine here. It should say Apple, but the point is that NUA is not this big AI autonomous robot. It is really meant to telescope and magnify and extend the effects of what we do in extension and applied research. Best practice number two, always remember that you should have a very broad and well-informed IPM strategy. So the NUA platform, we hope it's really good, but it should still be one tool in your IPM toolbox. You never want to make a decision in isolation. So the NUA models will do their best to predict a situation or a risk factor in your orchard, but if it doesn't look quite right, verify what it's saying. That's when you reach out to Mike or you reach out to your local extension professional and say, hey, NUA is saying this, but can we just have a few minutes to go over it and make sure I'm taking the right approach forward. And then finally, best practice number three is with NUA 3.0, ask for help early. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment, but this should not be something where you spend more than 5 or 10 minutes trying to figure something out. If you are, don't hesitate, reach out to us. We probably have the answer for you. We're really on top of things so far this spring, and we want to make sure we maintain this momentum going forward into April and May. So talking just a moment about technology comfort levels. So obviously, if somebody were to approach me with a question about NUA or the new platform or how something works and the code, I would probably be this little emoji on the left-hand side who's really happy and, yeah, that's no problem at all. But, even me, if we step outside a platform or a certain technology or a device that we're used to, that comfort level can change. Maybe with a new computer, I might be in the middle, or, if something comes up and I'm under a deadline, I might go all the way to the right because, it's not NUA. Maybe it's a new software application or statistics or something. So I just want to say that it's okay to be wherever you're at with your technology proficiency and comfort. Our goal is to reach you where you are. Especially with these new models, with pollen tube growth model, carbohydrate thinning, apple irrigation, whatever you need to kind of be the person who can get an answer for you. So to that end, we've done a lot of things over the past year. I put up this QR code. If you have a phone, you can scan that. It takes you to the same place that this URL does that I also put in the chat. But as we move forward, I also want to point out that for each of our models, we have specific resources. So in the upper left-hand corner, whether it's pollen tube or anything else, there's always going to be this watch tutorial link. So you click on that, it's going to take you to the NUA help desk, which I'll show you. Again, just multiple ways to increase the chances that you're going to get the information you quickly need. So if you were to click on that link, on the left-hand side here is what you would find. So I've created a landing page on the NUA knowledge base that lists all of the available supplemental resources for Apple management. So this first section I call Getting Started. And so one of the things you can do in NUA is create a profile account. And I really encourage you to do that, especially with what we're going to talk about today, because there's a lot of custom information that you don't want to have to remember every single time. For those of you who use the old website, you'll remember that every single time you had to go to a model, you might perhaps have to enter a biofix date or something like that. With NUA 3.0, if you sign up for a profile, those pieces of data or information are going to be saved to a personal account that's secure. So a couple of resources to get started quickly to create a profile. We have one for dashboard navigation, and then just a couple of other supplemental documents and resources there. In particular to today, we have a crop load management section. And so again, we have what I call quick start videos that I really tried to limit to 5 minutes or less. With the more complex one, you'll see 7 and 6 minutes respectively for what we'll talk about today, but it's an opportunity for you on your own time to kind of take a self-guided approach where, a month or two, or whenever you are out from now, when you maybe don't remember everything we talk about today, you can go back, you can play the video, you can pause it, you can rewind, just so that you're comfortable going into the season. Now on the right-hand side, I just have an example page for Pound Tube Growth Model of what you'll find when you click on one of these links. All of our videos are closed captioned. If that's helpful, we try to make these accessible for you all. There's a link to the model page itself. And then again, just linking everything here internally under additional resources are things that might be useful as you continue to use the Pound Tube Growth Model. Now, here's the most important part though. So, say you're going through the self-guided resources and you're still not sure, or maybe you think you found a bug on the website. The easiest way to get in touch with the help desk is to send an email to support@nua.zendesk.com. What that does is it creates an electronic work ticket that remains open until we find a resolution for you. Either myself or my colleague Kim Knappenberger, who works out in Western New York State part-time for this, we will get back in touch with you. And at this point, you should almost immediately get a confirmation email that says, hey, we got your request, we'll be in touch shortly. But then beyond that, within 1 or 2 business days, one of us, a real human being, will be in touch to try and follow up on your question or concern and find a resolution for you. Now, there are other ways to get in touch as well. If you are poking around on our knowledge base website, you'll see submit a request in the upper right-hand corner. You can certainly do that. You'll just select the submit a help desk form and then go from there. And then it's the same process. And I've already covered a lot of what's on this slide, except to provide some context about why we pursued this approach and how it's been successful so far. So questions you can ask: how to onboard a weather station, if you got bug or error, any sort of information requests. We do very basic weather station troubleshooting at this point, but if we have a very low threshold for this, and we try to pass you on as quickly as possible to your respective vendor if there's something going on, because our goal is to solve the problem. We're not here to solve every technical issue, and sometimes it's just faster to have you work with them. So we'll pass you on in those cases. We can also put you in touch with your local or regional extension specialist. And then this is really important moving forward. Well, if you've got any ideas or suggestions, we're never going to say no. I actually keep a list of grower ideas and things like that. So feel free to reach out. Just to provide some quick temporal context is that I did this slide back in the fall, and actually since then we're about to break 6,000 work desk tickets. So this system is very efficient. So despite the volume we get, we respond pretty quickly to you. I have 6-day average resolution time because a lot of our questions, can be answered very quickly in 1 or 2 sentences, but every so often, if there is a more technical issue with your weather station, sometimes those will take up to a week or so to fix. And then again, just the human beings behind this whole operation. So with that, I do want to transition a little bit. We don't have a lot of time, so I apologize for the speed. But for the rest of my time, for the next 10 minutes or so, I'm just going to go over the nuts and bolts of the Pound Tube Growth Model. And the next speakers are going to talk about the why and the how and the biological context. Again, if you go to this URL that I have up here, you'll see the model and you'll see that quick start tutorial link in the upper left. And so that's a good review in the future when you want to come back and look at this. So I'm going to walk you right through from the beginning, assuming that you do not have any experience with NUA, that you do not have a user profile account. So when you go to nua.cornell.edu, this is the landing page. And you can kind of think of this more as an advertisement page. So if somebody is not familiar with NUA, it basically showcases some of the features that we have. But to really get the most use out of this platform, you want to create your own account. So in the upper right-hand corner where that first arrow is, you'll see a sign-in link. And when you click on that, you'll get this pop-up. You'll go to sign up, you'll enter an email address, and you'll create a password that only you have. And then you click agree to NUA data use policy. And that's pretty much it. There's some configuration steps after that, which you can review again through quick start tutorials on the knowledge base, but I won't get into that today. But once you do that, what's going to happen is you'll want to do a little bit of configuration. So when you come in, you're going to be opened to your profile settings. There's personal info there that you can personalize, but the very first thing you want to do is add at least one favorite station. Now, the advantage to doing that is that if you look at a map of NUA, you'll see that there are over 800 stations. By having a profile, you can select your favorite 1 or 2 or even up to 10 or whatever, and those will be the only ones that display across all of your different models, if that makes sense. So here I've selected Shoreham, Vermont, up on the Lake Champlain area. And then the next thing you want to do is click over to the NUA Tools tab, which you'll see I've highlighted with an arrow, and then open up the Apple Tools dropdown and select Pollen Tube Growth Model. This gets you set up to go. So once you click on Dashboard, you simply click back, you'll see that now under favorite stations, you've got your selections available. So you'll see Shoreham in the right-hand corner there. If you had more stations selected, those selected stations would show up in that dropdown. The other thing I'll point out though is we selected Pollen Tube Growth Model. And so now that model is available in your personalized dashboard at the bottom. To access the model itself, you click on Go to Tool, and then on the right-hand side of the screen here, we have what this will look like the first time you use it. You'll see there's not much there. So in the last few slides, I'm just gonna walk us through how you would get this up and going in the next few weeks to use for this growing season. So the first thing you want to do is create what we call a block. So to do that, you'll see that create block button. I didn't put an arrow there, I apologize, but what you would do is you would click that and you get another pop-up that says create block. So there's a few different things you want to enter here to get started. You want to enter a block name. This can be anything you want. You can put in a location specific reference or a field number, whatever you want. The next thing you need to do, however, is select your apple variety. After you select your apple variety, and the dropdown is actually hiding this, you'll enter your pollen tube, or you'll enter your style length, which other speakers will get into, and then you click create. So what happens here on the right-hand side is your preliminary display after you've created a single block. On the left-hand side, you'll see that example 1 is now listed under blocks. And on the right-hand side, you'll see that there's a summary card or element called example 1 up at the top where I have an arrow. You'll see that it's got Honeycrisp selected, which is the apple variety I chose in that pop-up. And then it has an average style length of 13 millimeters, which is just an arbitrary number that I had entered to create this. If you ever want to go back to edit this block, you'll click over on the right-hand side of this card where it says edit block, and it'll open up that dialog again. And I'll show you how to enter a second block in another few slides. But what I want to talk about here in the last part of this slide is the fact that that we have several different elements available in this model. So right now I have growth graph selected and I have everything else turned off. If you want to turn more features on, you can turn as many on as you want or hide them. It's really a personal preference. So on the right-hand side, what we have is a visualization of growth for this block that we've entered. The starting date that I provided was March 9th. I actually pulled this from a location further south so I could show you what it looks like in real time. But you'll see moving from left to right, you'll see an accumulation value. Now you'll also notice, however, that it goes beyond today's date, and that's because we provide forecasted hourly values. I think it goes up to 5 or 6 days. I would have to check to be sure, but it does provide some estimate moving forward for planning purposes. We also have a growth table. And so what you'll see is I've turned off the growth graph on the left-hand side here and turned on growth table. It's simply a tabular representation of what we were just looking at in that growth graph. And then finally, the final piece of this model is the hourly temperature graph. And again, this is just a visualization of what those hourly temperature trends are for the period of time that you're looking at. So the next thing I'll tell you about is how to add in your sprays. So I have opened the edit block again by clicking that button I mentioned earlier, and now we see this card pop up. To enter your first spray, you simply select a date and actually an hour within that, click update, and it's gonna add your first spray. And you'll see that both in the graph and under the summary card in example 1, growth has been reset to 0 at whatever date and time you have selected there. So in the graph on the 17th at 4 a.m. it resets and then immediately starts accumulating again. So this is one way to help you track through time. And again, we're going above 100% over there on the right because we're looking at predicted forecast values. So in this last slide, I have created a second block, and it's exactly the same process. I have these side by side, however, to show you that they track independently. So if you create one block, it's going to look at weather variables independently of your second block. So you can completely customize these however you like. So again, example 1 has Honeycrisp. Example 2 has Golden Delicious. Example 1 has an average style length I entered of 12. Example 2 has 11, and so on and so forth. But what's really neat is if you look at that summary list over on the left-hand side, you get an at-a-glance view of where your growth is at for each block independently. And with that, I don't know how much time I'm at, but we could take questions or we could keep going. So Mike, maybe I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Dan. Yep, we are pretty much at time. While you do have that, there was one question that I think would be best to answer now. How do we get into this block area that you were just referencing?
Sure. Let me pull up my thing again. And let's see here, screen 2. And let me go back to that slide. Can you all see this still?
It's not full screen, but we can see the presentation.
All right, yeah, that's fine. I'm not going to do that in the interest of time, but let's see here. So let me go down here. I'm going to go back to this slide. So to create a block, we have this left panel here. And so we have create block. You're going to click that button and it's going to give you this display on the left-hand side. And this is where you can enter your block name. You can select your apple variety, and you can also enter your style length, which if I go down here, perhaps I can show you. Yeah, so this is a better example. So again, block name, apple variety, average style length, and then you enter your start date and any subsequent spray dates. Does that answer the question?
I'll see if he responds back to the chat box.
Yep.
But I think it did a good job of answering it. We do have one more quick question from Randy. If I have a MesoNet station on my farm, can that data be used for my farm in NUA?
So I'm going to answer this in 2 parts. The short answer is yes, because we do have an agreement with New York State MesoNet, and I'm assuming you're talking about New York State MesoNet, to allow their data to be used in any of our models. The flip side of that is there are still a couple of technical steps we need to do to deploy that statewide, but we do have a formal data use agreement. So I think at this point, it's a matter of being patient. And just as a really quick side note, if you ever want straight data from one of those locations, you would have to reach out to them directly. That is not something that will be available in NUA. But for the pollen tube growth model, yes, and also for carbohydrate and for irrigation.